I'm sure some of you guys have heard a quote somewhere in this line before. The beauty of life is the people we meet and the connections we make along the way. And for a large part, this is true. I've met so many incredible people throughout the span of my life, and in many ways, the lessons that these people have taught me have helped me to develop and become the very person that I am today. But at the same time, being well in my 30s and meeting my fair share of people until this point, I also don't think that I'm as naive as I used to be back in my early 20s. What we progressively realize as we get older throughout life is that some people in life whom we encounter upon are just unequivocally better off never meeting in the first place, not to even mention ever connecting with. Plain and simple. Some people will not only be a minor nuisance, but will even actively try to ruin your life for absolutely no reason at all. And for Yoon Jia, a 25-year-old South Korean former TikToker and live streamer with over 300,000 followers, this was tragically the case. After she last conducted her live stream on September 11th, 2025, she suddenly vanished. The first person to notice her strange disappearance was her father. After her last live stream ended on September 11th, he sent her a message showing his support for her daughter, telling her that she was the prettiest bunny in the world. However, after hours of no reply, Jia replied back to her father at 10:46 p.m. on the day by simply just texting, "Yes." Then she never responded again. Instinctively realizing that something sinister could have happened to their daughter, Jia's mother and father immediately drove to Yeongjong Island in the city of Incheon, where Jia last conducted her live stream. And after not being able to find or get in contact with their daughter in the subsequent few hours, they reported her as missing to the police at 4:22 a.m. in the morning on the next day. And 4 days after her disappearance, she was finally found. The police found her buried body with her legs pointing upwards in Muju, a county located in South Korea's North Cholla province. And after autopsy, the police announced that Jia's face was severely deformed due to unspeakable levels of beating, and that her cause of death was from that of strangulation. So then the question has to be asked. What kind of an evil being committed such a heinous crime onto her, and why was her body found at the mountainside in Muju County, more than 300 kilometers away from Incheon, where she last conducted her live stream? Thanks to a number of CCTV evidence, the suspect was actually arrested days before her body was found. Just 12 hours after Jia's parents reported her as missing, the South Korean police arrested Choi, a man in his 50s. We do not know his full name, as the South Korean justice system did not disclose it, along with his face, due to the nation's infamous criminal rights protection laws. So all that we know at this point is that his surname begins with Choi, and that's how we'll be referring to him. When Choi was first arrested, he made lies after lies after lies during the police investigation. He denied the fact that he unalived Jia, said that he last booked a room at a motel for her to stay in, and had no idea where she was, etc, etc. All lies. But then, after Jia's body was discovered a few days later and Choi's fingerprints were found to be marked all over her body, he finally admitted to the murder. Now, Choi and Jia had a bit of a history. He was, first of all, a large donor on Jia's live streams. But before we move on any further, we have to clear some outright misinformation out of the way. No offense to many ethical reporters out there who conduct their job morally and are always committed to conducting the due diligence. But the fact of the matter is, we just see time and time again of gossipy reporters just spewing out an article in a matter of minutes without ever properly conducting the necessary fact-checking. And if someone, often cases the victim of a crime, suffer as a consequence of the blatant misinformation written by the reporter, their reaction is just, "Oh, my bad." Then they go on their day, hastily writing another article for views, once again inundated with misinformation. And the initial journalistic coverage of Jia's tragic case was no exception to this rule. Most articles covering Jia's case has stated that Choi has roughly donated around 100 million won, or around 70,000 USD to Jia. This is absolutely false. According to an influencer who have previously conducted business together with Choi, his approximate $70,000 donation was not all given to Jia, but spread across multiple female streamers whom he had a liking upon. So sure, Choi most likely did donate a few $1,000s in total to Jia over the entire span of her streaming career. And perhaps he was a VIP from the online streaming platform perspective of how much money in total he spent towards multiple female streamers. But a whole $70,000 sum donation all for Jia alone, and a one and only VIP donor only for her? Absolutely not. And secondly, it is quite likely the case that most of the money that Choi did donate to Jia during her live streams did not even get into her pocket. To elaborate, Jia was signed to an MCM management agency throughout her streaming career. This meant that all of the donations and revenue that Jia made from her TikTok videos and live streams were all first received by her agency, whom then subsequently gave a percentage of the profits to Jia. However, knowing the highly problematic and toxic nature of Chia's management agency, we'll get into the details of this later. We can safely assume that most of the financial donations that Jia received from Choi actually went to her predatory agency rather than herself. So some of the criticisms that we've seen online against Jia in the lines of how she financially took advantage of a simp based on the false $70,000 donation misinformation is simply not true. On the surface level, Jia's case may seem similar to the case of Sato Airi or Mogami Ai, a Japanese live streamer who was murdered a few months ago by a donator who lent large sums of money to Airi, only to be continuously ignored by Airi and never receive his money back. We've previously made an in-depth video on this case, so please check it out if you want. However, when we dig deeper into Jia's case, you'll progressively get to see how the story of Jia does not possess much parallel at all to the story of Sato Airi. But anyways, as we can all instinctively tell at this point, Choi is a lustful old creep who had a thing for approaching young female streamers and wanted to find ways to get to as close to them as possible. And the following is the approach that he took. He would first donate relatively large sums of money, usually in the range of a few $1,000s, draw the attention of the female streamer, and pose himself as a sort of a wealthy businessman. Again, he used this scheme not only against Jia, but against many other female influencers and streamers as well. Then he lied to the female streamers, saying that he was the head of some big shot talent agency and that if they come under his wing, he'd be able to provide exponential growth for the influencer using his secret strategy. But then again, these were all lies. There was no agency that he owned, as he was factually just an unemployed creep in his 50s who wanted to get as physically close as possible to the young female streamers and influencers. And needless to say, most female influencers, when approached by Choi and his business offer, rejected his offer. And I mean, it did not take a rocket scientist to know that Choi was a complete fraud. Only the most basic of basic background check will have done it. For instance, when Choi introduced himself to the female streamers and explained to them on how he was so wealthy, he said that he was the CEO of a well-known IT company as well as a travel agency. However, when asked of the specific names of his IT company or his travel agency or provide written proof, he could not give any of it. Just a one-and-done red flag. You just simply don't do any money-involved business with such a shady person. But then, in all of the articles regarding Jia's death, they state that she was in a business relationship with Choi at the time of her passing. And this fact is indeed true. But then, why? How come Jia could not see the number of blatant red flags that other female streamers saw from Choi and got herself away from him, such as how they did? Well, Jia's toxic management agency is to mainly be blamed for this. To put it shortly, as an aspiring actor who was auditioning for roles in different K-dramas and movies, along with her live streaming career, Jia once again had a management agency that was handling all of her financials. But then, Jia's management agency could not care less about Jia's well-being, let alone her physical safety. All they cared about was money. Now, we have to keep in mind that at this point, Choi was periodically giving decently sized donations to Jia under his online nickname, Black Cat. And as we've stated previously, the donations that Choi sent went mostly into not Jia's pocket, but to her management agency. So from the perspective of Jia's agency, they wanted to keep relations with Choi as amicable as possible. In essence, just keep coaxing him so that he does not go anywhere and continue giving his few $1,000 donations to Jia on a periodical basis. From the perspective of the agency, they were literally making free money. While Jia was doing all of the actual hard work, her agency just raked in her profits while lying down on their sofas, eating their popcorns. And one day, Choi approached Jia's management agency with an offer. He said that he wanted to become the personal SNS manager for Jia and help her TikTok and livestream account grow. Now, remember that he proposed this offer not only to Jia, but to all young female streamers whom he was horny upon. We'll explain why, by the way. Horny is exactly the right word to describe Choi's sentiments towards the female streamers soon in the video. But then, the MCN agencies of most other young female streamers in South Korea whom Choi approached had half a brain cell left, or actually cared for the safety of the female streamers whom they were managing. So they fact-checked Choi's personal background, could clearly see that he was a fraud, so stopped him from approaching their contracted streamers and influencers. However, Jia's agency did the very exact opposite of what other sane agencies have done. According to her parents, Jia's agency actively encouraged Jia to have Choi as her personal manager in order to remain in good terms with Choi. And record of text messages between Choi and Jia's management agency show that the agency literally told Choi to quote their exact words. "She's under your control now. You can raise her to how you like it. We'll not get involved with whatever you do with her." Talk about a responsible talent agency. And Jia was just too young, kind, and trusting in the good of others to see through the red flags. She trusted that her management agency must have done the due diligence on Choi and thus accepted him as her personal manager. She trusted his words in that he'll bring a more systemic and professional approach to her social media endeavors. And from this point on, Jia's life rapidly turned into ruins. Choi, as her personal manager, began imposing more and more ridiculous work hours towards her, more than often making her live stream for more than 12 hours straight, and live stream well past midnight and into the mornings. A friend of Jia said in an interview that Choi had psychotic levels of control over every single action of Jia. When her friend once briefly met Jia for a cup of coffee, he said that her phone notification rang more than 30 times in less than a span of a minute, with them all being texts from Choi, asking where she was, what she was doing, whom she was with, how he missed her, telling her to turn on her location. You guys can all see how much of an insane lunatic Choi was, or rather, is. So as time went on, Jia became more and more exhausted beyond unspeakable levels due to Choi's incessant control and manipulation. And all the while this was happening, Jia's real management agency just sat there and watched, as they did not want to offend the consistent donor that Choi was, who gave them free money on a periodical basis. In fact, Jia's agency probably liked what Choi was doing, as he was making Jia livestream daily for double-digit hours at a time and raking more livestream profits than before. At this point, we all know the true nature of Choi. He was a serial liar who literally lied about every aspect of himself. He did not have an IT company, nor a travel agency. He was unemployed. He never had any professional experience managing influencers. He was not wealthy, as he was in fact severely under debt and was months behind in his rent payments at the time of his arrest. Even when he murdered Jia and was initially going under police investigation, instead of feeling extremely guilty over taking an innocent life and helping the police to find her body, he shamelessly lied to the police for days, saying that he didn't kill her, didn't know where her body was, etc., etc. He'll probably get into prison and continue his lying spree and lie to other inmates on who he is and take advantage of the more gullible ones. I mean, if there's anybody on earth who deserves to be mercilessly slapped around in prison, it is Choi. One of the most annoying little creep that we have had to research upon throughout our YouTube career. But then, a subsequent question naturally arises. If he was so broke, where did he get all the money that he donated across multiple young female streamers? This is where things get even more mind-boggling. In order for him to satisfy his lust towards the young female streamers, he was not afraid to sell his family. To elaborate, Choi, being the loser that he is, had no assets, but his father did. His father, who was his only family member, by the way, owned a house in Seoul. But without ever telling his father, Choi put his father's house on collateral and borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars from the bank. And with this money, he now began donating to different young female streamers whom he wanted to sleep with. And how do we know that his ultimate goal was to sleep with the young female streamers? Because before he murdered Jia, he was literally already arrested back in 2024 for illegally confining a female streamer in his house and forced S relations upon her. And for this separate crime, he was already undergoing trial in the South Korean court and was soon most likely facing prison time at the time when he murdered Jia. And this is one of the most problematic part of the South Korean justice system that the nation's citizens are perennially enraged over. When an S-offender gets arrested in South Korea, for the vast majority of times, the justice system first lets them out free. Then for the subsequent few months, until the criminal's trial date, they let the S-offender attend the police, as well as the prosecutorial investigations, comfortably from their own homes. Then when the S-offender eventually gets a prison sentence on the day of their trial, months or even years after the day when they have actually committed their S-crime, they then get locked up. But you see the most blatant problem with this, right? These S-offenders know that they'll be going away to prison in a few months' time. What do you think they will do until then, in their last few months, freely out in society? These are insane criminals who have assaulted a woman literally just a couple of days ago. And now, they know that they'll be going away to prison for years when their trial is eventually held in a couple of months' time. So do you think they'll just happily sit there at a cafe and wait patiently until the day they walk into prison? No. Many of them, in their last few months out in society until their trial date, go on to take revenge against their victims or commit another serious crime as their mindset works in the lines of, "Meh, I'm going away to prison soon anyways. Might as well have my one last fun." For decades and decades and decades, people have been bringing this issue up to the judges and legislators of South Korea. But then, the people at the top, frankly, just don't care. So here we are once again. If Choi was rightfully put away in jail after his illegal confinement and forced ass relations towards a young female streamer in which she was arrested for in 2024, and if the South Korean justice system made him rightfully wait until his trial date in an arrested state for the danger to society that he more than clearly is, the death of Yoon Jia will not have happened. It's just insane. Imagine knowing that they put baby oil upon many victims and took physical advantage of them, convict him for it, but tell him, "Okay, we know you've done bad things, and you're most likely going away to prison once you're formally sentenced at trial. But until then, you can be out free in society and do whatever you want to do. Hey, have one last dated party before the trial. What the heck? You know you'll be going away anyways, right? Might as well have your one last fun." But as ridiculous as this sounds, this is the current zeitgeist of South Korea and the stance of the nation's judicial system against ex-offenders, just daring them to commit another crime until their trial is eventually held. And needless to say, Choi, as well as uncountable number of other criminals in South Korea, have already done exactly this and will invariably continue to do so until the system changes. So for Choi, by September 2025, everything was coming to an abysmal end. His father's house that he secretly put down as collateral without letting his father know was placed under forced government auction in September 2025 as Choi was unable to repay any of the loans. This meant that Choi's father, who probably worked his entire life to buy the house, now had nothing left in his life because of his pathetic, perverted son. Choi only had a few weeks, or at most, a few months left out in society as a free man, as his judgment date for his S-crime committed back in 2024 against another female streamer was soon upcoming. But then, while everything was falling apart for him, Choi had one last hope that he still had going for him. Jia, or rather his mission of sleeping with Jia. He was still her personal manager, and in his delulu mind, he most likely thought that if he still managed her daily activities, continued to gaslight and manipulate her just enough, she will turn around and come to like him. However, his inappropriate hopes with Jia also came to completely fall apart in September. On September 10th, 2025, Jia told him that she could no longer bear having him as her manager and that from September 11th, she would depart from him and manage all of her live streaming schedules alone. And when Choi saw this message, he rushed to Jia's apartment and waited for Jia outside of her apartment on the night of September 10th until she returned home. And as we can see from this police CCTV footage, Choi did meet Jia at the elevator lobby of her apartment at around 7:30 p.m. on September 10th. From the footage, we can see Choi getting down on his knees and begging her. Now, we do not know what was exactly said between Choi and Jia during this encounter, as Jia is unfortunately no longer here to tell us the story. And well, when it comes to Choi, we know at this point that it is more probable to believe that the earth is flat than to ever trust that Choi will not have a lie coming out of his punchable mouth. And we can firmly assume that Choi probably asked her one last time to sleep with him for money, as to how he did with numerous other female streamers and influencers. He probably wanted to kidnap and confine her, as to how he did with the other female streamer victim back in 2024. But knowing how well surveillance cameras were installed inside Jia's apartment building, he most likely barely stopped himself from doing so. He did already begin to show signs of aggression on the day, such as getting close to her, snatching away her phone, etc. after all of his kneeling act didn't work. So on the very next day, on September 11th, Choi made his final move. After Jia finished her outdoor live streaming in Incheon, Choi kidnapped her in his car, then went on to brutally take away her life. We do not know exactly what happened inside Choi's car, as Choi will never tell us the full truth. But most likely, he would have once again asked Jia to sleep with him, get rejected for the 1000th time, as Jia was just never, ever the type of person who'd get into inappropriate physical relations for money or acting roles, according to all of her friends. Got enraged, then went on to end the life of Jia. And in his ever shameless attempt to hide his crime, Choi drove more than 300 kilometers from Incheon all the way down to the mountainous Buju County and went on to bury her body. Yoon Jia was too good for this world. In an industry where so many criminals are willing to take advantage of young female talent, she was just too trusting and continued to believe in the intrinsic good of people. She trusted that her management agency must have done the right amount of background checking upon Choi and trusted that her agency was acting on her best interest. She trusted that Choi really was trying his best to help her advance in her acting and live streaming career and ignored, or at least denied to believe, many of the red flags that Choi progressively showed until it was too late. She was an extremely hard worker. When ordered to stream daily for 12 hours straight, she did it without complaint, all with a smile on her face. And she did all of this because she had a dream. She dreamt of becoming a well-known actor. According to Jia's parents, she was actively auditioning for roles in different K-dramas and was slowly but surely building up her acting career by playing in smaller roles. And the reason why social media and live streaming was so important for her was that in South Korea's extremely competitive acting scene, she needed that edge in order for her to stand out and have the breakthrough in her career. And she thought that a social media account with a large follower count will give her exactly that. And she was actually well on her way. She already had more than 300,000 TikTok followers at the time of her passing, and knowing her various talents and incredibly hardworking nature, it could have been more than likely that we would have seen Jia acting in a movie or a television role in South Korea in a few years or even a few months' time. But then, we will tragically never get to see Jia's dream become realized, all because of her greed-driven management agency who saw her as a money-making tool rather than a human being, and the lust-driven, psychotic Choi who deserved to not only spend his entire life in prison, but suffer from much more painful punishment for the monstrous crime that he committed onto her. May Jia rest in peace, and we would like to provide our deepest condolences to her mother and father who have lost their one and only loving daughter. And for everyone who's watching this video, please stay safe, both online and offline. When it comes to your safety, always listen to your instincts. If someone seems blatantly shady and sus, and your gut tells you that something just feels off about the person, it is most likely unequivocally better off to just stay away from them, rather than be a trusting soul and give them the benefit of the doubt.